That failed. The trigger failed.
Weird.
Failed to reset. See if we can make up for that disaster. What the What the man? I seeded the out of that. Holy yes. Okay. Nope.
Didn't reset.
What's going on, guys? I'm Chris, and this is Regular Guy Training, and today we are going to talk about the PSA Dagger in, I guess, what would be a long-term review on it, although it didn't actually get that far. My initial review on this was of a dagger in its stock configuration that I ran with just a set of irons on it, and it ran fine for like 6,000 rounds. I did notice that there was a little bit of a tolerance issue back then because it was a well-known fact at that point in time that Magpul Glock magazines would just fall out of them while the gun was cycling. Now, on its face, I didn't think of it to be that big of a deal, mostly because, well, Magpul Glock magazines are horrendous because Magpul hasn't come up with an original idea that was good since, well, 2014, or actually even further back than that. But point is that it ran fine in its stock configuration. I just kind of set it down and I walked off from it, and I didn't really look at it again very much for quite some time. Fast forward, and not too long ago, I put together a video where I took a Gen 5 Glock 19 to 89,000 rounds, and I decided I was going to retire it a little bit early because the gun worked, but I wanted to retire it and take it out of circulation before something actually catastrophic happened to the frame or slide or whatever. No big deal there because, I've spotted a Gen 3 clone that is just sitting here unused, and all the stuff that you can get for it is really cheap, so why not? They're pretending at making a Gen 3 Glock, let's actually put that to the test. And oh dear, all of you called it, because the very second that I put out a post with a picture saying, hey, look at that, I dotted and compensated and mag weld my dagger, let's see what happens, haha. You guys called it immediately by saying, that's gonna die. Boy, how right you were. So let's talk about all of the things that went wrong with this, and technically that went wrong with another dagger as well, but we'll talk about all that here very shortly, right after a little bit of ad time. Today's video is sponsored by the Sonoran Desert Institute. Have you ever thought about making a living in the firearms industry? If you enjoy gun repair, ballistics, learning about firearms, the Sonoran Desert Institute might just be a good fit for you. To find out more about SDI, visit sdi.edu. Use the link in the description down below, or call 480-999-4767 today. And now back to the video. The second that I put all the stuff on this dagger, I decided I was going to leave the stock trigger alone because it works pretty good, it breaks pretty clean, I'll keep using it. And it did in fact run just fine. The only additional issue that I had is, well, Glock holsters, right? Because it doesn't take them, because we designed our dust cover stupidly, and now I have to worry about beginning to think about buying dagger holsters for it. But at least for now, you know, I can throw an X300 on instead of this TLR1. And by the way, the reason why it won't actually fit in Glock holsters is the dust cover is a little bit taller than it should be. So that extends the whole package a little bit. So if you got a light on the gun, it's not going to want to go into Glock holsters. And if you don't have a light on and use non-light bearing holsters, it's still not going to work. However, if you have something like an ALS, which you could back an Odyssey into, it'll still go in this holster with a TLR1 on it. It'll just be real tight. So if you stick an X300 on the gun, it'll go in and out just fine, no problem. So, okay, it's running fine. It's doing what it's supposed to do. great. Shoots flat, awesome. Love it. Maybe these guys are wrong. You're not at all. So after a little bit, I noticed something. The hinge style hook type trigger shoe that's in it is something that I just don't encounter anymore unless guys are messing around with like Langdon Tactical M9s or a 226 or whatever, which those are all rare at this point. Everyone that's running around with striker fired gun is some sort of straight shoe, or it's a Glock shoe, or if it's an M&P, which is a solid design, they got an Apex in it because it's just better in the first place. I don't really encounter this anymore. It's not really something that I want to end up getting really good at because it is a little bit different than other shoe types. What's the point of having it here? I ordered a Gen 3 Haley skimmer. Haley skimmer triggers have run great for me for a really long time because all they really are polished up Glock parts. All right, neat. Stick that one in there because a buddy of mine that's got one of these Dagger frames already has one in his, I know it's compatible, through his experience, I thought. So that gets installed, it all gets souped up, ready to go. We're gonna get a bunch of really high quality filming done of it. I at least thought that anyway, because from the moment we started shooting with this thing, oh dear, was the phrase of the day. Because the first thing that I encountered was a little bit of weird ejection problems where non-standard ejection stuff would start happening, like inline stovepipes, for instance. Then, much bigger problem, the trigger is failing to reset. Great. We decide that we're going to go ahead and change out lowers. Buddy of mine's got a different frame, got the same trigger in it. At this point, I'm placing all the blame on the Haley skimmer because tale as old as time. You buy a trigger kit from someplace else, it was made on Monday morning after a really great weekend, do the email chain back and forth, and we're good to go. You'll get new stuff. You're fine, right? So, okay, great. Put this new frame on, and I learned something else about tolerance issues with these guys as well. Buddy of mine that hands me this frame has an extended magazine release on his Glock. That's not a big deal. I don't have trouble with extended magazine releases on Glocks because the magazine release itself is fairly tight because the spring in there, it's fairly difficult to depress. So my really aggressive left-handed grip is not going to cause any issues. Surely. Also incorrect because, well, turns out Magpul Glock magazines falling out of daggers was an indicator of a larger problem, and that is, well, if you then start to put aftermarket parts in a lower, and then you start using a really aggressive left-handed grip where your right hand is grasping the gun firmly, turns out, if you barely touch an extended magazine release on a dagger, it's gonna make magazines fall out, as you can see here. Hooray! So now it's like, okay, I gotta examine the slide, I gotta examine my slide, my frame, see where exactly stuff is broken, let's plug in the correct parts, see if this will work. Still placing the blame on the Haley skimmer, I'm like, the plunger that's in my slide, that looks a little bit beat up. It's from this trigger. Let's throw in the Dagger one. Maybe that will make this a little bit better. Surely, because we're idiots. We install that, it runs a little bit better for like 4 magazines, and then the trigger starts to fail to reset again. This skimmer trigger is the worst, we think, because we're stupid. When I get the chance, I'm gonna pull all this stuff out of it, put Gen 3 components in there, and we're good to go. So we pack up, I do just that, stock components get in there, and then this happens. If you were watching closely, I didn't press that second shot, and it didn't reset. There's a lack of engagement. But it trips past the sear anyway. We'll see that again. Thing is firing on reset. So now that's 2 frames that have issues. One is a tolerance issue, and the other is all of this nonsense. And before you finish typing your thesis about why changing parts out is the reason why this thing failed, let's explain a couple of things about the Dagger. 1, whether or not they say it openly, they are actively trying to produce their own Glock. 2, it is a cheap imitation of one. And 3, that is why this failed. There is no good excuse to have the pins that you have in this frame. Not only have guys had pins walk out on them for some reason, but you also really run the risk of altering the dimensions of your frame, which is made of worse polymer than a Glock is. For some reason, I can't even put together in my brain. When you put pins in the frame that you have to beat out with punches and hammers and stuff. Glock frames are made to be taken apart with essentially a ballpoint pen and a little bit of force and a little bit of wiggling around, simply because they're functioning as the required parts to hold all of your stuff together in on a light frame that is fairly easy to bend if it's disassembled from a slide and then beat on with a friggin' hammer. Any Glock Armorer's course you ever attend will tell you these things. So when you make a frame that is made out of noticeably worse polymer, and I noticed this right away when I took a wood burning kit to it, because the first bead I put in on this frame gotta be real soft with how I applied this. None of these little needle points went really deep in the frame. And before the PSA fanboys say anything about me taking a wood burning kit to my frame, literally no one has ever had that problem with a Glock before. If you are trying to imitate Glock, you had best be prepared to be judged like one. So you have noticeably worse polymer with pins in that are required to be beat out of the thing. So the very instant that someone decides to augment their pistol to make it better than what you can produce in-house, we now have issues, and this is where we've arrived. Now, I recognize this thoroughly. You guys called this forever ago. But the reason why I'm doing this is so that you don't have to. And again, you have to consider this. I am a schoolhouse that happens to have a YouTube channel. Between private and open enrollment classes, I see 400 to 500 students a year that all fire about 2,000 rounds apiece. So if you divide that by 2, that's basically my pistol count. So I see round about 500,000 pistol rounds fired every year. And this bothers me a lot. Now I have to be on the hunt for guys that did anything to their lowers with regards to the dagger, which just causes additional issues that don't need to be there. And frankly, this just annoys me, because this is yet another thing that lets us know anytime that PSA actually builds anything themselves, it's hot garbage. Their AKs turn themselves into metal blenders instantly. The Jackal, of which the design I really like, when it's assembled by them, which is every time, you now have to worry about each individual screw attached to the thing, because like me, a lot of guys had their barrels just walk out on them. I have seen up to this point a lot of small daggers just breaking through use, and now with the larger daggers we have this little issue popping up for no real reason. And again, anytime that we see them assembling ARs, we see a lot of issues in that department as well. The only thing that really works from them is a parts kit that you put together yourself, and that's because they receive their stuff from OEMs. It would seem, based on the evidence that I have, every single time they are involved in the assembly or manufacturing process, what they put out is jank at best and unusable or dangerous at worst. And that's not okay, because now I have to look out for unnecessary nonsense when students come to class. So, you guys called it. You were right. You saw it coming forever ago. This thing absolutely died, and I'm not going to recommend a dagger to anybody, really ever. To the point where now, I've noticed that since my initial review on the dagger was put out, I've gotten significantly better at the evaluation process of equipment and that sort of thing in general, so now I have to go back and unlist that video because great. And frankly, it's just annoying to me. But there again, that's how this goes down. The data is provided in the way that it's provided, and we just kind of have to go from there. So, that said, if you want to come out and train with us, you absolutely can. Link for this is in the description below. If you want to support us through Patreon, you can do that too. And if you want to get something out of it, $41 a month will get you as much training as you would like, unless it's something like a private class or a soft-skin vehicle class that we teach simply because of the logistics involved. And as far as a private class goes, that's a fairly obvious reason to not let you take advantage of that. If you want to check out the rest of our social media stuff, again, links for all of this are in the description below. And remember, guys, a regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Be easy.